In the kaleidoscopic world of modern sounds and words, Jason Wilson emerges as a polymathic luminary, seamlessly blending reggae rhythms, folk melodies, and jazz sensibilities. His sonic concoctions are nothing short of musical alchemy, transcending genres and leaving audiences enchanted. As a singer, songwriter, and author, Wilson's prowess extends beyond the stage, delving into the annals of history and culture to craft narratives that resonate like a timeless melody. In the house, Jason Wilson and a new recording called Ashara. It's tracing your Scottish roots. Is this something you discovered later on?
I knew early on in life. I was made fun of in school because I grew up with my mom, dad, my sister, my grand, and my aunt, who had all come over me in 1966. So my Ayrshire accent was pretty thick as a kid. And everyone, even the teachers thought, oh, and when did Jason come over? And, oh, he was born here, actually. So, yeah, it's been part of me. I'm the quintessential hyphenated Canadian, where I'm Scottish Canadian or sometimes Canadian Scottish, depending the audience.
Where is this located in Scotland?
Ayr is in the lowlands. It's the west coast. It's south of Glasgow, not too far south. And its most famous son, I suppose, is Robert Burns, the poet, who everyone knows, even though they don't, because we all sing Auld Lang Syne on New Year's Eve every year, and he wrote that, among a million other things. So it's a beautiful part of Scotland. Well, Scotland is beautiful, but Ayrshire in particular is close to my heart, obviously.
Now, John McDermott's Scottish too.
He is, yes.
Okay, same region or
I don't know where John's from. All I know about John is he saw us play one time, and we do My Love Is Like a Red Rose by Robert Burns, but I played over Bob Marley's No Woman, No Cry, and he just lost it, and he was compelled to come up on stage and sing it with us that night. So there's no stopping John. So.
No, we did an album together, a duet
no,
album.
He's fantastic.
Yeah, and it was great because he picked this music, right? And he said this music never gets old.
No.
And much of it has to do with the imagery of the words.
There's a beauty in it, and I try to steal, heartily from that kind of that language. It's the first. I mean, I've always sort of dabbled in Lowland Scots, the language, in terms of my writing, but this album is really thick with it. Like 75% we'll say is pretty damn Scottish, and to the extent that there's words that my mom didn't even know, what does that mean? I'm like, I'll explain it to you.
No, you got the inflections and all the shape of the words, how they were originally spoken.
Yes, yeah. And that's, partly that's how I grew up, but also, there was some research involved for sure in that.
Yeah. I have a clip that I would play it for my class at Harris, and it was like early 1900s, and it was referenced as being the first rap music, and it was Scots.
Right.
Yeah. Scots have incredible sense of humor, but it was almost like one of those Eminem rap offs. Where
wow.
Yeah, and it's and the point that they made is that the Scots would do this thing where they would speak in the language, but they would go at each other, across from each other.
Right.
And it's almost melodic, but it's kind of monotone melodic, but it's who can outdo the other in these battles.
I'd have to hear that.
Yeah, I have to find this again, but I found it fascinating because there was a rhythm to it, and then there's also the pointedness of the conversation.
Well, there's the African American professor of music, and his name's escaping me now, but his whole PhD was on the idea that the call and response is a universal thing, and and he found it in Scotland. He found it in the west of Scotland, where it's like a woman would sing the one part and the rest of the women would answer it, much like they would do in Africa.
Yeah. And your research to make this album, put this together, where did you go with this when you dug into this?
I always wanted to kind of do something like this, but I suppose it was really kickstarted when my father passed away in 2019. And I decided to digitize his 8mm films, which I had seen growing up, of course, but never seen them to this extent. They were sort of profoundly beautiful now. Yeah. partly because they were digitized and it looked amazing. And it was really the key that opened that door, that I was going to explore Ayrshire as a place. I like doing that kind of thing anyway, but I hadn't done Ayrshire, I hadn't done Scotland, and I wanted to explore it as a place and how important it was, how central it is to our memory making, for my family, for me. But even further back to relatives, I've got a song about a relative from the 18th century in there. So, it was one of those nostalgia things, but also new in a way.
And you wrote material for this yourself.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's all part of the coming to terms with the past.
I think so.
I wrote one called Gloryland, and I went back to the 1860s with family.
Nice.
And I looked at their roots. And in a way, it's almost mythical to yourself because you have to put yourself in a place that you haven't been.
It's true.
And there's enough there to give you a grounding in the vibe of the whole thing.
Absolutely.
And that must have been just the fun of it.
That was the fun of it. It was in fact, diving into stories that, I maybe kind of half knew growing up or was told, but really diving into them and really trying to understand what, my mom had told me or my dad had said. Or, that was so entertaining for myself. I'd be lost in it for days. So.
And plus, you can't skate around the hardships. You're going to confront their hardships.
Oh, yeah.
and then try to sympathize with it and also bring that to light.
Absolutely. Yeah, my mom grew up in a conservation village called Ochiltree, which is a lovely little, like when you think of a postcard of Scotland, that's kind of where she grew up, population 700, really one of those sweet, quaint towns. Dad grew up in the ghetto. he grew up in Kilmarnock, in tenements, effectively, where there was one washroom to 8 houses, kind of thing, and you'd have to bang the door to go to the washroom to get the rats out there. That's where Dad grew up. So yeah, there was some hardships there, for sure.
Now, how did you map this out? How did the songs present themselves? Yeah,
no, it's a great question. The ages of man, I suppose coming to terms with Dad's passing, I think the age of the human, the youth, the first love, the responsible adult, the sadly middle age, which I'm beginning to experience, and then the end, So I roughly sort of try to find a song that would suit all of those. And some of the in-betweens as well.
Written about this?
Yes.
In text?
Yeah, I have. Not to the extent that I want, that I will be, but I have done a bit of that. I have a few books to my name, so I know how to do that. So yeah, that they inform each other, those worlds. When you're able to synthesize. But synthesizing for a song is can take forever, as you well know. It can take a long time to get. Just that distill the right amount for a song.
And also the instrumentation changes. You've done so many different kinds of music, and this one requires getting into the instruments of the area and also bringing in, I'm trying to figure out the reggae thing, where this gets in.
It's there. It's the most subtle it's ever been on any of my records. Reggae, that's where I started. Jackie Matu took me under his wing, and my cousin was in UB40 for 40 years, and I grew up playing with the Harvey brothers of Messenger and Toots and the Maytals and all of that. So, that's always there. That's when I really started. Before there was jazz and before there was this folky element too, it was reggae. So it's always going to show up. It's definitely a little more camouflaged on this album. Part of the reason is I'm playing acoustic guitar on half of the album. That was my COVID thing. I played with the great Dick Gaughan, who tunes in Dadgad, and he showed me some things, and I was absolutely terrible at the time. But with COVID, that was my thing. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna practice the Dadgad thing that Dick showed me and see what happens. And it really did. It really unlocked, because as we're both pianists, so like I'm used to writing from the piano, but it's a different shape
Totally.
when you're writing from the guitar. And I think that gave it a charm, for me at least. It made it very interesting.
Now, did you play guitar beforehand?
I played regular guitar, like sort of straight up reggae rhythm guitar kind of thing.
Okay, I had this thing many years ago. You think about an instrument you'd like to know how to play in some form or another, and I have no idea what goes on the guitar. And I had one somebody gave me for like $10, and it's set by the bed, right? It's a little blue thing. It's around here somewhere. So somehow I had this dream, and in the dream it all made sense. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
I saw my fingers on there, and I could play it. And I came out of the dream, and I put my hand on there, and I went, what?
Fantastic.
I'm always amazed at those who can just, it's like learning 6 languages.
It's, well...
it's like, how do you do that?
I think to temper your analysis a little is that I am not, an expert, but I've gotten to the point where, I've come up with some interesting shapes and colors and stuff that, being musical, that's allowed me to do that. But I still get a little nervous when I put the guitar on in front of a crowd, because it's not my usual sitting by the piano.
Yeah, but there's things that, as somebody would appreciate the work that's done on guitar, especially when it comes to roots music, and each country has a different way and a different touch.
For sure.
What they do, bending strings and how the strings are touched, and then the intervals, how they shape the intervals. I love that stuff, but I have no idea what's going on there. I know I can sort of emulate to a certain extent on piano, because we can play with the piano in between the notes.
Yes.
If you know how to do this.
Yeah.
So, but to do this on another instrument.
So that's the beauty of DAD-GAD tuning. So it's DAD-GAD.
Okay. What does that do?
It gives you a drone on the bottom.
Okay.
And it sort of rings out this drone. It limits you in terms of, structurally, I suppose, to an extent, unless you're an expert. But if you're playing sort of straight ahead stuff, this, that bottom note ringing out with, and then you can put the 4 and then the 5, and it still sounds good and it's still big, So that's what I found. I was just, because I didn't know, and because I was alone during COVID, as we all were, I just played around with it, messed around with it for hours and hours and hours, and came up with some things that might make sense to a DAD-GAD expert, and others that, like, what are you doing?
COVID was a time to really, if you were an idiot, you did nothing.
Yeah.
If you understood what this was about,
yes,
you did good stuff.
Yeah.
Was. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, there was good moments. I'm now a very bad chess player. I never played chess before COVID. I started very ambitiously to learn ancient Greek. So I've got the alphabet down, and a few where I can tell you about burning fires and up in the fatherland or something, and that's about it. But so I tried.
That is good. For me, it was a time to sit down and write, work on book. I had no time for. And get organized that way. You did this at Canterbury, which is a great place to do.
Yeah, it really is.
And did you do this over a period of time? Or?
Yeah, so we did the beds at Canterbury, and then, of course, with the wonders of technology, we were able to add bits and pieces. We got some of the Scottish lads involved, so we have Ali Hutton, who plays bagpipes and whistles, and we have John Somerville, who's an amazing accordion player. Makes me never want to pick up the accordion in front of him. Right. And then Jack Smedley, a brilliant fiddler. So they're all over it. And the wonderful thing, we had the luxury of, before he passed away, playing with Dave Swarbrick, who was the fiddler of Fairport Convention, when we did a couple of albums with him. And Marcus Ali, the great tenor sax player, who we've now been together for 20-odd years, picked up the whistles, like the tin whistles and low whistles, and you should hear him now. He's, he like can play bebop scales on a tin whistle, and so he's playing a lot of whistle. He plays the Irish flute as well, so he's actually changing instruments as well. Away from, the tenor makes its appearance, but so in that respect, it was a definite shift. It was a shift for this album, and I think we're richer for it because we're all happy with it.
Now it comes out on the 29th.
Yes.
And it's the 30th, you're at the Redwood.
Saturday the 30th at the Redwood Theatre for the first time.
Have you been there yet?
I've been there. I love it.
Isn't it great?
It looks fantastic.
Yes, it does.
I feel like you're touching the past as well, Toronto.
That's the thing of beauty about going into a place that was built in 1914. Didn't rip out the character
Not at all.
of the place. So
Not at all.
It's there in place. Who will be with you that night?
So we'll have the full band,
Okay.
not the Scots. We're not flying them over for that,
No.
but hopefully someday we'll bring them over for a few shows. But yeah, we'll have Marcus Ali, we'll have Carl Harvey, who's formerly the band leader to Toots and the Maytals on guitar. We'll have Vince Reel on drums, Michael Shapinko on bass, Laurel Tubman and Karen Wiseman on backing vocalists. And importantly, the two Bobs are opening up. So that's myself, Tim Bovaconti, and Fergus Hambleton of the Satellites. And we do, it's a fun thing, we do Bob Marley folk and we do Bob Dylan reggae.
Yeah, of course.
Obviously. So it's a fun opening act.
Well, great stuff. I really appreciate you coming by, Jason.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll catch you there.
Absolutely.